Good evening. I call the July 20th, 2022 Apple Valley Planning Commission meeting to order. The first item of business is the approval of the agenda. Any changes from staff?
Madam Chair, no changes to the agenda.
Changes from the commissioners?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Schindler and seconded by Commissioner Scanlon. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Nay. Motion carries. The next item of business is the approval of the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are considered routine and will be enacted with a single motion without discussion unless a commissioner or citizen requests to have any item separately considered. It will then be moved to the land use action items for consideration. 3A, approval of the minutes of June 15th, 2022 regular meeting. What's the pleasure of the commission?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Schindler and seconded by Commissioner Scanlon. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Oppose? Nay.
Abstain.
2 abstains. Motion carries. The next item of business brings us to number 4, public hearings. Orchard Place 5th edition. We will now open the public hearing for agenda item 4A. The affidavit of publication for the notice of public hearing is available for inspection in the planning department. Everyone wishing to speak at this public hearing should be sure to fill out the attendance roster or, if virtually, register with the meeting organizer. Please include your name and address so that accurate records can be maintained. We will begin the procedure with a brief presentation by city staff, followed by a presentation by the petitioner of the hearing. Upon the conclusion of the presentation, city staff will be asked to comment on the proposals, conformance with pertinent regulations and policies. After that, comments will be taken from the general public. City Planner Thomas Lovelace.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. What you have before you tonight is a public hearing to consider 3 requests, and that would be the subdivision of the by preliminary plat of Outlot D of Orchard Place 2nd Edition into 2 lots and 1 outlot, conditional use permit for restaurant use, and then site plan building permit authorization for 2 just over 7,000 square foot commercial retail buildings. The site is located in what we call the Orchard Place commercial development, and it is bounded on the east side by Pilot Knob Road, south on the 157th Street on the south side, 155th Street on the north side, and then the Pulte Townhome development on the west, as well as the Fisher maintenance facility for their sand and gravel operation. And you can see that it's a 16.22 acre parcel. Property's comp plan guided for commercial and is zoned retail business, and the proposal that they have before you tonight is consistent with both the comprehensive plan and the current zoning of retail business. This is the Orchard Place 2nd Edition. The plat was, again, platted into several lots on the southwest corner of the site for development, and then if you've gone out there, you can see all the development that has occurred, several multi-tenant retail buildings, as well as a couple of standalone uses in that location. And this was an outlot designated for future development. The preliminary plat is calling out for 2 lots, one that about 1.7 acre lot and 1.3 acre lot, with the remainder 13 plus acres that would be left would be created as a new outlot for future development. Just one note that, of course, you see the 1.7 acre lot to the north, as well as the outlot that's encumbered by a 104 foot wide pipeline easement. This is, again, the Orchard Place commercial. This was just kind of a site plan that they had identified. And again, you see the buildings that have been constructed down in this location. And if you recall, you made a recommendation and the city council approved a Lunds and Byerly's grocery store at this location, and now this is the area that we're considering. At that time, they had identified several larger scale buildings along the western edge of this, and one smaller building. They are now looking at doing a couple of those buildings at this location instead of just the one. This is the site plan. As you can see, two buildings located, this building located on the northern lot, and this building is, again, on the southern lot. Access would be off of English Avenue, which is a private street that connects with 155th Street on the north side, and then meanders down and connects with 157th Street on the south side, two public streets. They would see a lot line that runs right through the middle of the area here, so with that, you'd be seeing that probably common access and egress and ingress will have to be created to accommodate this type of development. The one thing to note is you can see that we have a building that's located that just right on the edge of this public drainage and utility easement. And the one thing that, as well as a patio, the patio isn't as critical as the building itself, but that building should be moved out of that so that it doesn't touch it like as it's shown, because even though the building looks to be out of the easement, there are footings and other things that are underneath that support that building that will likely encroach into that easement area, and our engineering staff and the city has concerns with that. The other thing is that a sidewalk should be constructed along the west side of English Avenue. There already is a sidewalk along the east side of English Avenue, and then connections should be made from the front of the buildings to that sidewalk along English Avenue. They show a drive-up window service located here for a restaurant. That is the reason for the needed conditional use permit. They've not identified, I don't think they have a user, but they're looking at trying to get a conditional use permit approved for that. So everything will be kind of contingent upon the type of user. Class 3 restaurant versus a Class 2 restaurant. Both would need conditional use permits, but they do have different parameters or conditions set forth for the type of use. Again, like for instance, the Class 3 restaurant has a certain size, a maximum size that can be allowed, and other conditions related to any type of a Class 2 restaurant. So we'll need a little bit more information as we move forward with this project. The grading plan, again, this site has been mass graded to accommodate future development, so there'll be grading to provide for the proposed project for the two buildings, the parking lot and roadway system that would be designed. Our civil engineer has taken a look at that. Her comments are in the staff report, but it's a pretty straightforward project as far as any grading issues. Utility plan is another thing. It's pretty straightforward. They'll be making connections from the existing utility, sanitary, sewer, and water lines that are located on or within the English Avenue. And also you see storm sewer that will be connected throughout the site, and then the stormwater runoff will be taken from the site to the ponding areas that's just west of this proposed lot and outlots. And the one thing that take a note, once you enter, you move water from one area to another, that requires that we need a public drainage and utility easement over that section. So as part of any submittals, revised plans on their preliminary plat, they'll be required to put a drainage and utility easement over that. The landscape plan, we feel that there's a lot of opportunities for additional landscaping, and I've identified the areas here where they can provide for additional landscaping, and so we should receive or hopefully get a revised revised landscape plan that identifies additional plantings around the buildings as well as we also need the plant species list as well as the quantities that are being proposed so we can provide the review necessary to ensure that it's the proper plantings for the area and also the number of plantings so we understand will they be able to meet that 2.5% requirement that is set forth by city code. In the interior, it looks pretty good. So seems like they've done a fairly good job of providing the plantings here. They do provide also some perimeter plantings, foundation plantings along this building. They don't show it along this building to the north. The elevations, good mix of materials, similar to what has already been constructed there. HJ Development, who's the developer for this site, is also the developer for the properties to the east. And so the buildings will be similar in styles with a variety of materials, brick and ephes and stone. So they're providing a good variety, and it appears that the materials are meeting the qualifications or requirements set forth in our zoning ordinance. And both Lot 5 elevations, and they call them Lot 5, Lot 6, but it's the two north-south lots, will be similar type of building. So again, I mean, it's a 7,000 square foot building, somewhat identical, so that's what they're showing. The one thing we noticed was on the north building, they are showing a drive-up window, but they are not showing any kind of drive-through service related to that. So they do have a drive-up window located on that elevation. So at this time, you've already opened the public hearing. We'll take comments and close the hearing. There's no action requested tonight. And we'll be asking that they provide revised plans that be submitted to us so we can review them before the next planning commission. And hopefully we can come back with a recommendation at that time. I'll take any questions.
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Diekman?
Madam Chair, Tom, when I was looking at the elevation drawings there for Lot 5 and 6, I found them to be identical.
Yes.
So buildings aren't the same size, and they don't show, well, they don't appear to be the same size. Are they exactly the same size?
Yes, they're both 7,000 square foot buildings. I don't know what the dimensions, if the dimensions are slightly different or not, but they both are shown at 7,006 square foot buildings.
Okay.
Now, the one building you can see to the north that I was talking about, look at the building to the south, and they show the drive-up window located along the east elevation, and they show the building along the in this building, they show it on their elevations, but it's not shown on the plan. The buildings could look a little bit different as far as maybe width and depth.
Right, but they both show a north elevation being the front of the building,
Yep.
which is not accurate.
And it just may have been a mistake or something, but I'm going to presume that they would orient that building, if it's going to be similar if they're going to be similar, that the building will have to be oriented
Like
such that the
mirrored.
front, it will be on the south instead of the north.
Yeah, it would be mirrored.
Yep.
Right, okay. Yeah, and part of the concern is the additional drive-up window on what would be the north building, which there wouldn't be.
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Madam Chair, Tom, there's a couple of things. Reading it sounds like they have ample parking, so if something the building has to be moved in terms of that easement concern, that won't be an issue with losing some parking spots or whatever that has to be done there to accommodate that?
Well, we'll have to see, I guess, we'll have to work with them to see how far they have to move that building to get it so that the footings are outside of that easement location. And does it require maybe just reducing the size of the building to such that they can move it without impacting the rest of the site plan?
Okay. How is trash going to be handled?
That's an interesting one, is trash is handled located at here are the two trash enclosures located here. The civil engineers requested that they provide some auto-turn plans to show how the maneuverability is gonna happen with not only deliveries, but trash pickup. So these are the proposed trash locations.
Okay. And then as far as the elevations going with what we've done so far in the area and trying to have that balanced design, is the backside of the buildings, since they're going to be visible to, if there's any details from the front or that can be brought back there to kind of break up the area?
Sure, we can talk to them
Yeah,
about that.
you know, that discussion, and if they had some better industrial type drawings first next time, that'd be great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Tom, can you go back to the previous one? There are patios. Is that the patio to the west of it?
The patio is on the west side here, and then
And
the
on the top
patio
it's
is
on
on
the
the
right.
east side there.
Okay.
And we would just require that, we typically require having some type of decorative fencing around there. And I showed it on the, I had a note on the site plan, but didn't note that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay. Okay, so there's no other questions. Is the applicant here?
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. Chris Moe with HJ Development. Thanks for having us. Happy to be back here again with the next phase of our project over at Orchard Place. Our first phase is full, so we're excited to be talking to you about this next phase to address kind of some of the questions that have been brought up from you so far. And Tom, we're really in a kind of preliminary stage here in that we don't have any tenants that we've signed up to occupy these buildings, but want to get going on the process so that we can start construction next spring. We feel like we have some activity, a lot of candidates, but since they aren't secured yet, we don't have a lot of the kind of tenant-specific demands incorporated in here, which would include trash enclosures, more details on the elevations, those type of things. As far as addressing things such as landscaping, we can certainly add more landscaping to the plan to dress that up. The elevations, I actually sent Mr. Lovelace some updated elevations today. We've been working on kind of getting those updated and furthered along, and we'll have those at the next Planning Commission meeting for you to review. That'll have, more detail. They'll be complementary to the buildings that we just built, but not the same, kind of a little bit different to kind of give it some differentiation. We will be adding some more detail to the rears of the building, especially along 155th, since that's going to be a roadway that's going to have a lot of traffic on it. So I think having them, be visually appealing from that side is something that we're definitely going to keep in mind. I was just talking with our engineer as far as that easement goes. We've got some room to scoot the building out of that area and make that work. If you have any other, specific questions for me, happy to answer them.
Anyone? I have a question about the building in the north. That doesn't necessarily have to be a restaurant, correct?
It does not have to be a restaurant. So again, we don't have users lined up. So what we're trying to do, because restaurants are one of the real active categories right now
Okay.
that are actually signing leases for spaces, and we're trying to make sure that we don't have to come back and kind of make that request at a later date if possible. So we'd like to have that approval in place because we feel fairly confident we will have one. But with that said, it wouldn't necessarily have to be one.
Okay. I think that is it.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you. If you are here in person, please come to the podium to speak and address all comments and questions to the chair. If you are joining us virtually or via phone, please submit your questions or comments to the meeting organizer. Looks like there's nobody in the audience unless one of you want to speak. How about the virtual organizer? Do we have anyone in queue who has any comments or questions?
Ms. Chair, there is no one who would like to speak.
If there are no further comments, I will close this public hearing. It is the policy of the Planning Commission not to act on an item on the same night of its public hearing. The Planning Commission will weigh all comments and information received tonight in its deliberations at future meetings. This item will continue to appear on future Planning Commission agendas until a recommendation on the petition can be forwarded to City Council.
So our expectation is that we'll be working with staff or with with the consultant and the developer based upon the comments we received from the Planning Commission and comments that we have on revised drawings. And once we get those revisions and we've taken a look at them and hopefully they meet our expectations and meet code requirements, we'll bring back this request to the Planning Commission for consideration.
Thank you, Tom. Item number 5, land use action items. There are none to report. Number 6, other business, Orchard Place Flex Business Sketch Plan. And again, we have City Planner Thomas Lovelace.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, what we have is the chair stated, this is a sketch plan for proposal for about just under 70 acres of land for the purpose of creating two lots as well as 4 outlots to allow for construction of 2 identical buildings, again, 208,000 square feet. They'd be flex business buildings, excuse me. And then the three lots that we're talking about would be used for stormwater management with the last outlot for future development. The site is located on the north side of 155th Street, just west of Pilot Knob Road, and the proposal takes it all the way to future Johnny Cake Ridge Road, as well as would be future 152nd Street, and you'll see that as we show you their sketch plan. Property is currently guided for mixed business campus and offers a variety of uses with kind of a corporate campus philosophy to it, as well as looking at certain amenities related to not the ponding areas that are showing up here on the site, similar to what has happened down in the retail portion on the south side of 155th Street, with ponding areas that have some open space around it with trails and so forth. This is the Orchard Place concept plan, and again, this is the area that we're looking at right now. A little hard to see, but with the kind of a feature of stormwater ponds to provide for the necessary function of a stormwater pond, as well as providing as an amenity for the overall development. And when this concept plan, which is part of our 2040 comp plan, identified intended uses were for medical, corporate campus, office, industrial, and commercial retail. So the concept likely would be fall under those intended uses. Zoning map currently has it at sand and gravel. This property would be rezoned. It would not be rezoned retail business, like the property that to the south, which was rezoned from sand and gravel to retail business. But we would be creating a new zoning district for the overall area that would be consistent with the mixed business campus comp plan designation. So we'll look at that and prepare an ordinance that would have uses and kind of percentages that are identified in the comp plan. The ordinance would be consistent with those things identified in our new comprehensive plan. And this is the site plan. Again, it'd be looking at extending what English Avenue. English Avenue would likely become a public street at this time north of 155th Street. And then would be the extension of 152nd Street from Pilot Knob Road. There already is a curb cut at that location. It's a 3/4 access, which means that you provide a right in, right out, and a left in on there. It's not a full access at that location. And then it would meander along to the west and then connect with future Johnny Cake Ridge Road to the west. The Johnny Cake Ridge Road and how that gets constructed, when it gets constructed, is somewhat dependent on a couple of things. When it's established, the amount of traffic that would be generated with this type of development and any other development that may occur. When is that threshold, or when does that number reach the time that we have to make a connection such as this to accommodate the overall development here. The one thing that is interesting is that if I had an aerial that could show it a little bit better, if you were to drive down Johnny Cake Ridge Road, look across 42, you'll see piles of gravel and such on that, at that location, and that just tells you that they're continuing to actively mine that area. And so when they have some processing plants near or around that alignment, so that becomes an interesting challenge as they move forward doing development on the north side. They identify ponding areas. This is currently a temporary ponding area that is located at this location, and then calling out for a stormwater ponding area here, as well as future stormwater ponding. The one thing that our engineering staff mentioned that, well, it wasn't expected that this pond was going to stay, but if it is going to stay as part of this development, then it has to be incorporated into a series of ponding areas, like shown in the comp plan drawings that I just showed you a little bit earlier, and become, again, an enhancement as well as an amenity for the area. Otherwise, it appears to be set up with access off into the site off of English Avenue, as well as 152nd Street, and then one access off of 155th Street, which has already been set. It provides also a good kind of flow. In particular, you can see the backside, they'll butt up against each other, the rear sides of the buildings. So likely that would be kind of their receiving loading dock area in the back, and it provides for good access in and out of the site via the roadway system that's being proposed for this with this sketch plan. And this just kind of shows the concept plan and kind of overlaid that with the proposed buildings, and you can see that the buildings kind of meld right into the pond, and obviously that's not going to happen, but I think these were done somewhat illustratively with the idea that this is the capacity, this probably would be the general size that would be needed to accommodate the overall development, and with the other smaller ponds, which would be kind of pretreatment ponding areas, but with the idea that any ponding here, if it is to be manipulated, can occur, but it would, again, have to be some type of amenity for this overall development. That's always been the intent, is that these ponds kind of coincide or work together to provide that amenity that is necessary to provide that enhancement of the pond. So it's just not going to be a typical ponding area. So we'd have to work with them. And then they have to also be cognizant that if they start, how they move these ponds obviously have an impact of what can happen with the remainder of the property as you look at these 200,000 square foot areas. So manipulating the ponding areas in a different location, different orientation, different size, will have, again, could have some impact on the perimeter of this overall site and how development will occur on the remainder of that site. So with that, I think Bruce has a couple of slides he wants to present to you before I think you get into any conversation regarding this with the applicant.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'll be right up. I'm switching over to do exactly that. So I wanted to do an introduction to the mixed business campus as we understand it and what the opportunities are here. And first off, the area that we're generally talking about for the 416,000 square feet of office flex use is here. And for a couple of years, HJ has been working with a medical clinic group, and you haven't seen those plans submitted yet, but it keeps moving around. This just happened to be the screen grab I took from HJ's website just in the last week. And so again, as I think Tom has used the word, I'll use the word illustrative to indicate that there are uses already planned for this location. And the purpose of me, Tom is the project manager for what's going to occur internal based on the development we're talking about tonight, which is this. But I also wanted to explain a little bit about what we've been working with Rockport on and the discussions that we've had from earlier in the year. And I've shared some of this. And, and so I want you to understand what isn't and what is, and so therefore why we're looking at this site for this particular development. There's a story to it. And so, for example, well, why didn't they put it up in the northeast corner? It seems obvious. You just lay that out and it'll work there, and we'll figure out a transportation interchange area at Pilot Knob and 42 that'll work better for this site than this sweeping concept that Dakota County has as one of its concepts. Okay, all well and good. But talking with Chris Moe from HJ this morning even, the user that we're talking about here, it kind of has, it's a pretty standard office flex type of building with dock doors, and it has a functional use internal to the mixed business campus, and you still would seek, they would seek a higher and best use for the corner at Pilot Knob and County 42. And so that is why they're selecting this south location for these two buildings. And what's driven that is a conversation that I've shared earlier in the year, that Greater MSP and the deed have been involved in a site selector search for a location in Minnesota. And working with Liza Robson and Pete Fisher, we chose this corner for a larger, it would be a larger manufacturing location, kind of similar in size and square footage to what we're familiar with at Uponor. It's not Uponor, and actually we don't know who it is, but it's still prospective. And so we've tried to retain this corner for that higher and best use for development. And since we're not over, and what they're talking about is a spec office flex industrial type of use, below it, you really need to, where are the pieces going to go, where aren't they going to go, why are we approaching this the way we are? And it's really because of this larger user that conceivably could be the northeast corner of the mixed business campus site. Now, we don't want to wait forever, but the anticipated users that Tom is presenting tonight fit best south of the 152nd road alignment, and we're going to continue to try to attract and all we know about this, and all we received a report from Deed and Greater MSP last week was you guys submitted a very competitive proposal, and good for us. And what we know is that we're not going to try to put the proposal that Tom is working on anywhere but where it's being proposed tonight. And it's just trying to fill in the story so you understand that we're trying to stay true to Orchard Place and the master plan, but also trying to find the right uses at the right locations. So I'm going to call Tom's materials back up.
Thanks, Bruce.
I don't have much to add, but so the applicant, again, is HJ Development in Rockport, and so they can provide you with any further information, and you can ask any questions, but always be cognizant of, put it in my last,
I got it.
my last slide, that, again, this is no official action. He just wishes the applicant wishes feedback. Always remember the Planning Commission don't state specifically whether or not you would approve or deny the requests, but just identify any specific zoning questions or issues that you might have. So with that, unless you have questions for me, I'll let the applicant provide you with maybe some additional background.
Anyone have questions for Tom? Okay.
Thanks, Tom and Bruce. Yeah, Bruce did a great job, I think, kind of laying out how we landed on where we're proposing this today. We're just here kind of initially with the plan to understand any feedback that we would have from the Planning Commission before we really start, moving forward with our efforts on it. As he mentioned, it's 200,000 approximately square foot buildings. These would be built on a speculative basis without tenants. You've probably seen other facilities like this get built in other neighboring communities. I think you've seen another couple projects that have been similar from Skinell and Opus recently that have made it through the city process, and these type of uses that we're proposing are really similar to that. So the type of users that would end up here are probably manufacturing users, med tech users, users that are going to have some component of office and some component of warehouse space. The exact percentage is really hard to know because you don't know, you're building them and then the tenants show up and then you lease to them. And really what's driving that is market fundamentals, just how long of lead times you have with sourcing materials, like precast, for example, is 50 weeks out right now. So when these large users of space show up, they need it next month, not a year and a half from now. So the way that the market has responded to that is by really just putting up these buildings on a speculative basis, and then a tenant shows up and they fill up. And that's kind of happened for some time now, the past few years. You've seen it in a lot of, neighboring communities. The big distribution type users that you hear about, like think Amazon distribution, this site really doesn't lend itself to that type of a user, just given the transportation network around it. Those type of users, kind of the just bigger all warehouse space, are ending up really off of 35 kind of in Lakeville because of the transportation. They need access closer to something like 35 for that type of use. So within these buildings, we really foresee smaller users, probably 2 or 3 users, maybe 4 users per building. So smaller businesses that, again, are doing manufacturing or selling some sort of wares out here and doing some degree of warehousing out of the space. With the supply chain stuff, a lot of businesses have adjusted now, and they're needing to hold more product on hand to be able to sell it versus waiting for it to come from a container ship in another location. So that's the idea in terms of what we would plan to do here, is assuming we could get support from staff and council, we would move forward with, construction of these buildings sometime next year, assuming we could get to that point. So that's kind of the idea on the product and the process and the whys. As far as the stormwater goes and how some of those kind of issues were brought up in both the staff report and from Tom. I'm not an engineer, I won't pretend to be one, but I did bring mine with me, so they can get up and talk about what is planned and kind of how that's all gonna get phased and the calculus that's kind of went into it behind the scenes and how it compares to what was kind of seen in the more bubble plan picture way back kind of when the comp plan stuff was getting put together. So I'll ask Will Matzik with Kimley Horn to come up.
Hi, good evening. Thanks, Chris. I am Will Matzik with Kimley Horn. I've been working with HJ and the AVR folks on all the initial phases of the project, and certainly with city staff as well. And so we had worked on the ponds to the south of 155th Street. All the ponds throughout the entire Orchard Place development will work together in concert. And so what we've laid out so far is just kind of areas. The first phase of the development, more on the retail component of it, we needed about 22% of the land area to accommodate the stormwaters and the trails and all those types of things. We're anticipating a similar amount of level here at this site. And so we've allocated that approximate percentage here so far. As we're thinking about stormwater, we'll want pretreatment, all the same infiltration, really, really low discharge rates. So most of our stormwater is actually going to infiltrate into the ground, very similar to the design we have performed previously. And so all of these will work together. Actually, all the stormwater from this site here that you're seeing on the screen ultimately goes into the ponds to the south that have already been constructed. And so those are all sized to accommodate this, and we'll work with city staff as we go throughout. Tom had made mention that there is a smaller pond just to the south of the easternmost building. That pond actually exists today, and it wasn't shown in the master plan just yet. It was built originally to accommodate some of the right-of-way for 155th Street to treat that water. Rather than filling that pond back in and digging a new one, we're going to utilize that basin as well as a pretreatment cell and have that work within the overall network. And so really just thinking about the overall project, how can we be efficient, use what we've already got, and then build upon that with larger basins, and then think about phasing it as we go. So as we develop further around the site, we'll expand the pond larger and continue on with the overall plan. We don't want to build it too big here initially because we want to hold some of the water. You'll notice to the south of the site, those ponds have been completely built out, but they're not holding water yet because we don't have enough development. So on these northern ones, we're gonna phase it as we go, and there's still some mining activities further to the west. So just thinking about the overall phasing as we go throughout the project. So that's just a little bit of an overview. I'm happy to answer any questions that relates to engineering or stormwater, or I'm sure Chris was happy to answer any other project-related questions as well. So,
Commissioner Schindler.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I know that, and Tom had mentioned this, that, the ponding's kind of one of the things that's being used as kind of an amenity for this site and all the buildings around it. And my biggest, the thing I'd like to see is kind of some idea of how you're going to incorporate that ponding for these particular buildings, because it looks like that building on the west side would probably be adjacent to the ponding. So I'd be curious to see how, because that type of a building and that type of a use, it might be a perfectly fine use to take advantage of the ponds, but I guess I'd like to see kind of what you're envisioning of how the ponding would line up with the buildings shown here.
sure. So with the ponding there, we would, the look and feel of it probably would be pretty similar to what's to the south. We would have a pretreatment cell likely, kind of like to the south, but they'll be hold water they will also infiltrate. And then we would have likely, some form of walking paths or other things. So, some of the users, some of their employees or visitors could utilize the overall network in the area. We're really early right now in the overall process. Our initial thinking was trying to get some feedback as it relates to the building uses and then just the overall areas and functionality. But we have some work to do, admittedly, because we are so early with staff and our team as well, and just how some of the amenity feel might look and the actual aspects of how the stormwater will function out there. But we're open to feedback here, so we can consider that as we move forward, certainly.
Anybody else for the engineer? Commissioner Mahowald?
I would kind of echo Commissioner Schindler's issues. I mean, obviously, we're very early in the process here, but the size of the buildings relative to the ponds has certainly a functional aspect to them, but the aesthetics and the amenity piece of it is something that I'd kind of look forward to seeing what you come up with.
Sure.
With
Yeah.
regard to the character of the location.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely think about that. And just for reference, just so you all know, like, this area in Orchard Place is, I would say, atypical for just development in general. The ponding and amenity areas we have here are probably double what you would normally have for a regular project to treat the stormwater and everything. So these ponds that are both on the south as well as this are very robust in size, and so it's much larger than normal from a land area standpoint and the opportunity to do some things on site.
Anybody else? Guess not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Appreciate the feedback.
Chris, can I ask you a question? Yep. I'm going back more to the buildings. So is there a risk at pre-building before you have tenants and stuff of this nature and this size? I understand that's the new thing of having these warehouses and stuff like that, but I mean, if things turn around or anything like that, are we ever fearful of having a vacant?
There's certainly a risk. I mean, there's always a risk with that, but that's a risk that has played out well for anybody that's been willing to take it thus far. So all the trends that are in place now, assuming they continue, I would say that risk is rather low. There's not a lot of vacancy out there for warehouse space. Generally speaking, it gets built and it gets filled up in fairly short order, just with all the market dynamics that are out there with users that are looking for that type of space. We haven't seen any spaces really anywhere that have gotten built sit out there longer than probably 6 to 8 months, I would say. Nobody has a crystal ball. I mean, there are question marks out there right now, obviously, with interest rates and construction costs that are making the puzzle a little bit tougher to solve. But so far, tenants have been willing to pay a higher rent to offset those. So rents have risen quite quickly for this type of space and are continuing to do so, and they've so far, offset those other kind of factors that would be putting pressure on a project to make it not work and sit vacant.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any questions for Chris? Guess not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to Mr. Bruce Nordquist, please.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, the next Planning Commission meeting is Wednesday, August 3rd at 7 p.m. Between that, the City Council has a meeting scheduled for July 28th at 7 p.m. And going deeper into August, there will be a council meeting on August 11th. And there'll also on the calendar is a Wednesday, August 17th, Planning Commission meeting at 7 p.m. The agendas for both the 3rd and the 17th haven't been finalized yet, but I believe we've already said that we're trying to to bring back the public hearing reviewed project this evening for final consideration. That's all I have.
Is it safe to assume that August 17th will be your last planning commission meeting with us?
Oh, I believe it's safe to assume that. I thank you for bringing that up, Madam Chair. It's just a reminder that I am retiring at the end of August.
Motion?
Move, we adjourn?
Second?
That is made by Commissioner Schindler and seconded by Commissioner Scanlon. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.